Okay, I think we can start. First of all, thank you all for being here. We are really looking forward to this interesting session from one of the STRATEGO webinars. Today we're going to talk about entrepreneurship through an intersectional lens. You will have the pleasure to listen to Francesco Lagrasta from the University of Bari and to Erika Branca from the University of Antwerp and Ghent University. An online session is always a bit more difficult to have interaction, but that should not refrain you from, well, I hope it should not refrain you from asking questions. If you have a question during the session, during the presentation, just raise your hand and we will give you the floor. If you would like to wait until the end during the Q&A part, then that's also possible, of course. You can also type questions in the message area, and then we will be very happy to answer you to answer these questions. Maybe also good for you to know, as you saw when you entered, the session is being recorded. It will be shared on the STRATEGO website. That also gives you the possibility to have another look at the session afterwards. And we will also share the presentations in a couple of days. So this allows you, these two things allow you to have another look at the session afterwards if you would like to recall some things that we discussed. Okay, so if there are no other questions, or if there are no questions, I would like to give the floor to Francesco from the University of Bari. He will start with a presentation about feminist theory in entrepreneurship research. Thank you.
Can you see the screen, I guess? Yes? And
yes.
Thank you, Joanna, for that introduction. I am Francesco Paolo Lagrasta from Polytechnic of Bari. And today I'm going to talk about one of my research my research stream, which is feminism and entrepreneurship, the relation between feminism and entrepreneurship. Before starting, I would like to briefly introduce myself. I earned a PhD in 2023 with a dissertation about the role of feminism on entrepreneurial behavior and strategy. Now I'm adjunct professor at Polytechnic of Bari, and I've always had a passion about entrepreneurship and feminism. But during my PhD, I started also to feel something for qualitative research. And I guess that if some of us hearing my words, hearing my presentation, starts feeling that this kind of research, this kind of approach meets his or her needs, its research needs, could contact me. I leave the presentation for everyone. Here are my contacts, my personal website and my institutional email for any kind of support. So my agenda for this brief presentation starts with an introduction to the themes of feminism and entrepreneurship, why I choose this topic during my PhD, and of course why I'm keeping in doing research on these themes. Then I start with a brief literature review with the studies that already investigated the intersection between these two themes, and then I will dive into my current research, which is of course, as I said, qualitative, and how in practice I started to investigate the realm of feminist entrepreneurs. So First of all, I would like to make sure that feminist entrepreneurship has a long legacy, a long story, but has for long been overlooked. We have to say that, of course, feminist cultures had shaped the way that different genders perceive themselves and perceive the society, but from a main entrepreneurial point of view, feminist businesses have always been overlooked. And this is the reasons why this happened are a lot, of course, but maybe one of the main reasons stems from the fact that feminist businesses posit themselves in entrepreneurial archetypes that are way far from the dominant ones. Another thing that I would like to make sure is that feminist entrepreneurs, investigating feminist entrepreneurs helps us to understand more about entrepreneurial motivation. This is because when we investigate some entrepreneurial phenomena that are characteristic of a specific group, we have the opportunity to see, to understand motivations and values that drive specific instances of entrepreneurship. And joining these two topics, I decided to investigate, of course, feminist entrepreneurs.
Francesco,
Yeah.
There is a question, I think a very interesting question in the chat.
Okay.
Can you read it, or shall I read it for you?
The chat.
I'll read it for you. So the question is, how do you define feminist businesses? Is it the same as a business managed by women?
It is a little bit more complicated than this, because there are many approaches. According to social identity theory, we have that we use the self-identification as feminist from business owner as a good proxy of feminist businesses. But as I will explain later, there are different views about that. Another thing is that sometimes feminists are assumed as women, but it is not completely correct, because of course I think that people from different genders could identify as feminist. So I don't put a limitation about gender, but of course this is by now also an open question. So it is really problematic by now. Anyway, from a merely theoretical point of view, and from also a pragmatical point of view, I identified several motives that could drive research on feminist businesses that range from understanding entrepreneurial phenomena that could generate high social value, because we will see that some of feminist businesses could generate high social value, to understanding the role that personal cultural orientation could have in developing entrepreneurial motivation. This is important because for years we assumed that the only dimension, the cultural dimension, that could impact in entrepreneurial motivation was the national one. But in a world that is, of course, intersectional, I guess that the only watching only the national dimension is, of course, having a blind view of the phenomenon. Sorry, yeah. Okay. Starting from what we have, what was already done, I started with a literature review about the theme, and the literature review was aimed at identifying extant studies focusing on entrepreneurial phenomena, on feminist entrepreneurial phenomena, and identifying a methodological or theoretical pattern that could characterize the extant knowledge. So we adopted a SLR, so a systematic review protocol, to identify relevant studies. And what we understood is that the phenomenon was still overlooked because at 2022, we had only 13 empirical studies investigating the realm of feminist entrepreneurs that were mainly investigating it in Anglo-Saxon cultures. Most Africa and Asia were almost completely overlooked, and of course we had no studies with a setting in Europe. And another thing that was really interesting was that we had a lack of empirical studies, but an hypertrophy of conceptual and speculative studies. And I felt that this was really a shame, a pity, because we had a lot of feminist researcher investigating critically entrepreneurship without watching the realm of the lived experiences of feminist entrepreneurs. So I put my research in this intersection. From themes, a thematic point of view, the themes that were mainly addressed could be grouped in three domains: that of feminism, that of entrepreneurship, and that of challenges. Feminism were mainly interpreted as their secular and Islamic instances. From an entrepreneurial point of view, the studies were mainly aimed at investigating entrepreneurial and managerial styles, or a group dimension, so the network of entrepreneurs. And the challenges that were mainly addressing were that of challenging patriarchal context and the gender inequality, of course. At the end of our literature review, we built I would say simple taxonomy about the way the tag that researchers were using for identifying entrepreneurial feminists, feminist entrepreneurs, and feminists, of course. And we have a first difference between feminist entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial feminist, which is really interesting. Entrepreneurial feminist was is a tag that was developed by Orser in 2013, and she identified them as a particular class of feminist entrepreneurs that were embedding their values into their business models, targeting specifically women. Feminist entrepreneurs, of course, for just going back to the question in the chat, I guess that it's a more wide definition that covers more generally people who identify in feminist and act manifestly or latently. This is important because especially in contexts like developing countries, we have a way of experiencing, of being feminist that is way far from our perception of acting as feminist, and it's of course more something that is more latent, but of course they pursue gender equality. Starting from these hypotheses and the results of my SLR, we started in investigating feminist entrepreneurship with a qualitative, from a qualitative stance. My main focus was about understanding what were the values and the motivation that could drive feminist entrepreneurs. With, of course, with an intersectional perspective, because as I said, I was not into excluding some genders, races, ethnies, or ages from my investigation. I adopted the pragmatism stance, of course. If someone that is into research could, oh, there's someone. And as some question about my research methodological and theoretical protocol, I will answer, because it's a way to, it could be too time expensive to exploit everything, but I started with the definition of what is feminism, and this is really hard, an hard task, I would say, because feminism is not a monolithical culture, but it has different phases, and every effort in trying to capture just a single core of feminism is going to fail. This researcher, Groening, in 2000, tried to achieve this objective, and end up with 4 main values that could be characterize every feminist instance. But of course, this is not something that I would say is written in the rock. It's something that has been, of course, also challenged from extant literature. On the other side, from the cultural point of view, I started investigating the way that cultures could undermine entrepreneurial behavior, could incentivize or undermine entrepreneurial behavior, and end up with finding in theory of planned behavior, which is a common theory used to investigate entrepreneurial behavior, as a good theoretical background for interpreting my results. Going rapid, fast in sampling interview, I recommend everyone to use their personal network, because it was a really a good research, a good resource for my research, because you know, finding people that are entrepreneurs and identify in families is could be an hard task. I held some interviews, 12, but it's an ongoing research, because I am currently keeping in interviewing them, and I adopted the Joya methodology, which is a coding and content analysis methodology widespread in qualitative approaches, to generate the main themes that were characterizing my my sample. At the end, I built a framework that could could somehow contribute to understanding the phenomenon of feminist entrepreneurship. I started with feminist values, which are the proximal factors impacting entrepreneurial motivations. But what emerged from the interviews was the propellant action of interpreting, understanding entrepreneurship as a field of feminist action. What was I would say the input that drove this understand was fighting internalized prejudice as something internal, but also being exposed to gender prejudice in job environment. Many of the feminists that I interviewed reported bad previous job experiences and understood their entrepreneurial action as something that could be somehow liberatory or give them freedom from hierarchical structure that connoted their previous jobs. Also, I am currently investigating feminist business practices. So in a more operational, I would say, from a more operational viewpoint. And of course, many of the entrepreneurs said to me that their feminist identity exerts in their way of communicating and treat customers. So it is really, there are really common feminist outward practices, what I could name outward practices, but they are also aware of the costs of abiding feminist practices. They are really, I would say, not romantic from this point of view. So at the end, from my current research experience in feminist entrepreneurship, I will say that it generated by now, of course, some societal impact, because some of our interviewee are now more conscious about the value their entrepreneurial action has on the world, on their community. From a managerial and educational point of view, we are now communicating with our university and also other entities, institutional entities, to develop strategic programs and incubation programs for startups that could somehow inherit the results that we had in our research. And of course, from research, merely research point of view, we contributed to adopting theory of planned behavior for understanding a phenomenon that has been by now mainly overlooked. These are the references for the ones that will have the presentation to just check some of the references I mentioned before. And the content of this presentation is mainly derived from two works we are now publishing in relevant, I would say relevant journals. Okay, I have finished.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions at this point for Francesco? If you have a question later on, okay, Lucilla, you have a question.
Yes, I have a question. Thank you so much for your talk. It was very interesting. Maybe I missed it, but did you interview only feminist entrepreneurs or also entrepreneurial feminists, if I say correctly?
Because of the sampling, I interviewed feminist entrepreneurs, but because entrepreneurial feminists are a subgroup of feminist entrepreneurs, in my sample, there were also entrepreneurial feminists.
Okay, and so did you see a difference in the two groups, or how did the...
Yeah, because there is a difference in consciousness, because entrepreneurial feminists built their business model around feminist values. Feminist entrepreneurs are mainly people that maybe started with a business, with also a traditional business, but then their feminist identity started to emerge. So, especially, for example, in HR decisions, many of them told me that they feel they are aligned with their feminist identity when they they have to decide about their collaborators or their team. So there's a difference about consciousness and business model, and it is mainly that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Also see a question from Tatiana.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. It was super interesting. I was wondering, how did you define or identify your sample? And what would you recommend to aspiring researchers who would like to do similar research or try to investigate this interesting issue of feminism and entrepreneurship? How can they identify the sample of feminist entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I will be really clear, because identify a sample of feminist entrepreneurs is really difficult. So what I did was, starting from my network, identified the first, then I used snowball sampling, which is ask to people that were in the sample to inform other people that could be feminist entrepreneurs, of course, to join the sample. Another thing that I did, and it was really also funny, I would say, is that I disseminated my research with a call to action using both institutional channels from my university, but also going to some incubators we have in Bari, entrepreneurial incubators, with literally some, I would say, documents, informative documents about my research, and leaving them on desks. And then many of the members of my sample were recruited by that, because you know, from a theoretical point of view, you have social identity theory that says to you, if someone recognizes himself as a feminist, it's a good proxy, it's okay. Then we have another step, which is a call to action, and they respond to it. So it is somehow really robust from also from a theoretical point of view. My reviewers told me that was okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions at this point, I give the floor to Erika. And Erika, the floor is yours.
Okay, first of all, can you see my slide correctly? I think so. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Johanna, and thank you, Francesco. I'm Erika, researcher at Ghent University and University of Antwerp, and I'm working in the ECOOM student entrepreneurship group. I will just be really fast in the presentation of myself because we have a lot to talk about. So we are going to discuss how to conceptualize intersectionality and how it can be applied into research. We will, of course, make some reference to the entrepreneurship research field. So to begin defining intersectionality, we need to understand two essential ingredients. The first one is heterogeneity. So it reminds us that our identity is more than just a sum of isolated characteristics, like being a woman or an ethnic minority. Instead, our identities are composed of multiple overlapping dimensions like gender, ethnicity, class, sexuality, which interact in complex ways. So the graph on the right shows us a different combination of gender, ethnicity, and social class, and that can create very different social realities. So even if two individuals are both, for example, female, they might live experiences that are profoundly different because they come from a different social background or from a different ethnic identity. So heterogeneity invests us to think about the rich complexities of social identity rather than treating people as belonging to a single isolated category. So this is the first ingredient to define intersectionality. The second one is social power. So it's not just that the people are different, it's that the social process and hierarchies assign more privilege or disadvantage to different identity positions. So the wheel on the right visually maps this. Individual closer to the center, for example, white, male, heterosexual, wealthy people tend to have more social power. As you move outward from the center, you see how, for example, race, gender, sexuality, immigration status, and other dimension, disability, for example, create layers of marginalization. So they are far away from power. So intersectionality is about recognizing not only that our identities are complex, but also that our identities are also affected by social process and hierarchy, and so social power. And it's about recognizing how these structures combine and how multiple disadvantages interact to shape lived experience. Now that we have seen that identities are heterogeneous and also that power shapes them, let's look at how intersectionality have been described and how it works. So Kimberly Crenshaw offers a powerful metaphor to capture this concept. She describes intersectionality as what happens when a woman from a minority group crosses a street, and each road represents a different system of oppression, racism, colonialism, patriarchy, and instead of facing just one challenge, she is exposed to multiple overlapping dangers coming from different directions at once. So those roads actually intersect, and this gives us the idea of intersectionality that actually shows us that oppression isn't experienced one piece at a time. It's layered, it's cumulative, and it's also simultaneous. So the diagram here further illustrates this complexity. The different axes like gender, race, class, and ability intersects in ways that deeply structure people's lives. So what we have understood at this stage is that intersectionality shows us that separate systems of domination don't operate independently, but they overlapped and reinforce each other, creating what Collins called a matrix of domination. But why does this matter? Because it directly shapes people's lives. So if it influences their opportunities, their experience, and even their perception of themselves and the perception of the world. So for example, someone who faces multiple intersecting disadvantages might have fewer chances to access education, funding, networks. And so their everyday experience in workplace, in school, in public space will also be different because it will be marked by exclusion or discrimination. And over time, of course, this experience can have effect on how people perceive what is possible for them, shaping their aspiration, confidence, and agency. And these structural barriers are crucial when we think about entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship, as we know, depends heavily on recognizing opportunity, having confidence to act on them, and also to access to the resources that make them real. So everyday experience of inclusion and exclusion can also shape how individuals, for example, perceive risk, and also how much they feel that the entrepreneurial path is available for them. So intersectionality just doesn't just affect where people start, but it affects also what they believe is achievable and what pathways are open to them, including the pathway to becoming an entrepreneur. But now that we have an idea of what intersectionality means, the next big question is how do we use intersectionality in research? And these slides try to summarize some of the key challenges that scholars are facing and have faced in the past. The first one is how does one actually think intersectionally? And what does it mean to design an intersectional study, and which categories should be think about when we are doing an intersectional study? Should we rely only on gender, race, class, always in any context? How can we actually avoid essentialism, so treating categories like woman or immigrant as if they mean the same thing for everyone? And closely related to this, of course, there is how do we analyze intersection once that we have selected the categories that we think are important? And also, is using intersectionality enough to make our research critical or cutting edge, or is something else needed? We will try to briefly reply to all these questions, most of all. The first one is how does one actually think intersectionally? And a very influential way to, let's say, operationalize intersectional thinking is what Maria Matsuda called asking the other question. So the idea is really simple but powerful. Whenever you see something, a phenomenon that appears and seems to be a form of inequality, for example, racism, you train yourself to ask, where is patriarchy in this? Where is class in this? What about heterosexism? So Matsuda mentioned highlighting that inequalities never occur in isolation. And so different systems of oppression are actually, as we said, interconnected. So asking the other question because an habit of critical thinking, and it prevents us to reducing complex social realities to a single dimension and push us to uncover the hidden layers of power that might otherwise be unnoticed. Then the second question is, what does it mean to design an intersectional study once that we are starting thinking intersectionally? There are two main strategies. The first one is called situating yourself. So this does not only means to listing your identity categories. So I'm a female, I'm an Italian, but it involves building a narrative about how my personal experience, my intellectual background, and my social positioning influence the way I approach my research question, what I notice, what I miss, and how also do I interpret my data. I added here an example from a Davis study in which she's actually positioning herself as a white woman that is studying the discrimination process of from a racist point of view. So she said that it's really self-aware of her social positioning, and this might have an impact on what she feels is important in her research and also in how she's shaped and designed her research. Another strategy is complicating gender. So intersectionality, as we said, challenges the idea that gender can be treated as a standalone category. Instead, gender is always intertwined with other social markers like race, class, or sexuality. And these layers must be taken into account. So a practical strategy is to start from a gendered example and then layer additional difference on top of it to reveal how multiple dimensions of inequality interact. The example you see here shows how an advertisement that seems to only reflect beauty standards based on gender actually also reflects racial and heteronormative biases once we dig deeper into the example. So in the context of entrepreneurship, for example, gendered gaps in participating or success may look different depending on how they intersect with other social dimensions. So more for a practical point of view, once that we have started thinking intersectionally and we started look at the phenomenon from a broad picture, is actually how do we design an intersectional study? So before McCulloch's contribution, intersectionality was mostly used theoretically and without clear methods of doing empirical research. but she actually approaches intersectionality, suggesting also to look at a more quantitative methods and methodologies. And she also identified that intersectionality was mostly discussed theoretically with two different approaches. The first one is the complexity of categories, which comes from post-structural thinking. And here the focus is on showing that categories like woman or black are not fixed, they are fluid and unstable. A researcher in this tradition questioned the very idea of rigid identity group. For example, they would show that being a woman means very different things depending on the context. And this actually helps us to understand how identities are socially constructed, but it's harder to apply when we want to do systematic empirical comparison. While the second approach is called crossing identities, and it builds on Crenshaw's original work. And these strategies look at the lived experience of people who stand at the intersection of multiple forms of marginalization. For example, studying Black women specifically, so not just women in general or Black people in general, but Black women, focusing on the intersection of gender and race. And this approach help the researcher to give visibility to multiple marginalized groups, but tends to focus on very specific cases, making broader comparison more difficult. So what McCullough did was to propose a third approach called the intercategorical approach. So here researchers use identity categories strategically to compare multiple groups systemically. So for example, we are comparing Black woman, Black men, and white men. And so this allows us to see how different structures of inequality, like racism and sexism, in the example that I made, operate together and produce differences across groups. And it's, of course, a powerful strategy for empirical research, but of course it has some risk that come with treating categories are more stable than they really are. But this approach actually was the one that was mostly used in quantitative research. And we have here also an example from McCullough in which she is studying how gender, race, and class intersect to shape economic opportunities and workforce participation among African American women in the United States. And it shows that women, particularly those from low income backgrounds, face compounded barriers that cannot be fully understood if we look at gender, class, or race in isolation, because they were, of course, facing barriers related to gender oppression, racial oppression, and also class oppression. So building on McCullough's work, these slides show how intersectionality research has evolved. Methodologically, it was, as I said, mainly qualitative, but now it's also grounded in quantitative methods that allows to compare multiple groups to analyze patterns across dimensions and also to reveal structural relationship between these social categories. The graph that you see here summarizes a review of 700 mostly applied papers, and it shows the most commonly studied social categories. We can see that the most frequent is sex, gender, followed by race and ethnicity, and to a lesser extent, we can see socioeconomic status. Then we also have other dimensions like sexual orientation, disability, and family status, and so on. But as we can see here, the most common dimensions are still gender, race, and class, because gender and race are the most visible, and class is the one that shapes the most opportunities of people. So intersectionality offers us a critical framework, of course, but it's not sufficient itself to truly make a critical and transformative work. We need to apply intersectionality actively by being also reflective on what we're doing, by conducting research in specific contexts, and also by combining it with other theoretical and methodological tools. For example, in entrepreneurship, this means not just identifying that certain entrepreneurs face barriers, but also understanding how and why this barrier is shaped by a larger system of power. And in entrepreneurship research, intersectionality can also be mixed and integrated with theory coming from the entrepreneurship field, like, for example, the resource-based perspective, institutional theory, and so on. The idea is to actually move behind simply adding more categories and instead try to transform how we study entrepreneurship, so situating entrepreneurial opportunities and outcomes within a system of privilege and oppression. And we can do that starting by thinking intersectionally and also design an intersectional model. And this hopefully will open up much richer, more critical, and also more impactful avenues for future research in entrepreneurship. So being said that, I will just quickly present an example of what we have done in the ECOOM student entrepreneurship group. I will just quickly go to the model that we drawn so you can actually see the most interesting part because we are running a bit out of time. So as you can see, this conceptual model proposed a moderated mediation framework. So what we have done is that we identified gender as a key predictor of entrepreneurial self-efficacy. Why? Because we know that the system of oppression will actually have an impact on how the individual feel that they are capable of doing things, also entrepreneurship, and that this impact will be of course, the person that the individual we are looking at is not female or male, but it's also made of other social identities. So we wanted to understand if the interrelated system of oppression related also to migration and social class will have a more stronger negative impact on self-efficacy. And then we hypothesize, of course, self-efficacy as a mediating mechanism, so that the lower self-efficacy that comes from system of oppression may also have an impact on entrepreneurial behavior. I will quickly jump to the results table. So what we discovered is actually that gender affects self-efficacy, and this effect is stronger for migrants and lower class individuals. And we can see that also self-efficacy mediates the relationship between gender and entrepreneurial behavior. And the negative impact of gender on ISE and also on entrepreneurial behavior is amplified for female immigrants. So we can see that the system of oppression is not acting only on the perception part, but also on the entrepreneurial behavior. So thank you everyone for listening. Now it's time for Q&A. So I will just stop sharing so I can see if someone is making questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Erika, for the interesting presentation. Are there any questions for Erika? Or for Francesco, of course. I maybe already have a question, Erika. Could you tell us a little bit more about the first results and subsequent research that could be done based on the results of this empirical study?
Yeah, first of all, I hadn't had the time to tell that, but it's actually the first attempt that we made in the ECOOM student entrepreneurship group to study entrepreneurship from an intersectionality lens. We already had interesting results from a quantitative standpoint, but we also have collected some data on other social identities. We have, for example, disability, sexual minority, and so on. We use them in this model just as a control variables, but of course they need to be tackled in a different way from what we have seen and discussed in the previous minutes. And also what could be done in the future will be to look not only at the effect, but also on why and how those systems of oppression are actually impacting self-perception and entrepreneurial behavior.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay. I found it very interesting to get a nice overview, both from the literature and also some very interesting definitions. Francesco, your definition about the entrepreneur and the feminist entrepreneur is very interesting. Thank you for that. Erika, also thank you for a very nice overview of the different ways of how you can conduct research also in this domain. And I would like to thank all participants for their participation. You know that you will get the presentations later. You will also have a little bit more information then about the ECOOM student entrepreneurship study in that presentation, because we did not have the time to go in depth into that part. And if you have any questions, I'm sure that both Francesco and Erika are happy to answer them by email. And of course, you can always contact me as well, or Sophie from the STRATEGO group. Okay. Sophie, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I think just thank you all for joining. I think we had some interesting presentations, so we're happy at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a nice
Thank you.
day.
Bye.